Welcome to Oz Chat. Welcome to Oz Chat.
Really glad it was not
Welcome to Oz Chat.
It's like pretend we just saw each other for the first time. Logging on. Hello! We haven't just spent 5 minutes trying to make Sophie look like less of like a amorphous cloud.
It's really lovely to meet you finally. We've Twitter known each other for a while.
Yes, we have. Lovely to meet you too.
And congratulations on, and you know, I actually had to, it's been really hard to figure out which book are we doing?
With kids illustration, it's sort of like you have your own ones that you write, and then you have ones that you're like brought on to do illustrations for. So obviously you're writing them yourself. Takes a lot longer than like just doing the illustrations for someone. Oh, that takes a long time too, but you know. So if it's something you've written and illustrated yourself, it's like change starts with us. And
absolutely love it.
Yeah, this is the third one in the series I've done with the amazing Hardy Grant Egmont. Sort of like a little line of books about like progressive values and feelings and being kind and being loved and things like that. So this is the third one that's about using your voice and protest and the environment and little things you can do to be a better citizen of the earth and all that.
Very good timing.
Yeah. Well, it was inspired by the climate strike stuff that was going on last year. Like we were thinking of what to do for the third book, and all of the climate strike stuff was really, really in the news. And I was living on the Gold Coast at the time, and I went to one on the Gold Coast, and I was like, oh, these kids are so amazing. And so I sketched a couple of them there, and they actually became some of the characters, like you can see. So at the end I have like a whole heap of characters, and they are actually from my sketches of when I first went to the climate strike protest.
That is amazing.
And,
I absolutely can't wait.
With like a little jacket on. I think the Dalmatian actually had some words on his jacket, something like, you know, like stop polluting the earth or something like that, but I couldn't quite fit that on.
I love it, and I love that activism in there. And I mean, these are books we just haven't had, and why haven't we had them?
Yeah.
And you know, a publication's great when you kind of think, why has that not been done before?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess there's been like more of like a global turn towards doing what you can within your own space to be an activist, instead of, you know, relying on, you know, people in upper echelons like make decisions for you. You have to like use your own voice and use the capacity to which you're given freedom to like actually put your own voice out there and make your own way. And I think that is something that's really, really important to like give to younger kids. And I mean, it was a bit like, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but like, should kids be thinking about this kind of thing? Like it's, I mean,
should. It's their world, and they think about it anyway. This is the thing. It's kind of like if they're going. So when of course, books have protested for a long time in what they contain, but the visual of young children holding protest posters and that being not frightening. So because I didn't grow up with any of that, and I still find the visuals of it frightening. I know that sounds weird, but I'm also autistic, so the idea of let's all go into a crowd and make loads of noise a little bit, but you know, there are lots of ways to protest. But and I think so for my kids as well, I'm thinking back to all the things they read when they were younger, and what in there actually showed that activism in a positive way, in a physical protest way, that really sort of physical side of doing that and moving your body to a certain space to make a statement.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I like, when I was thinking about this book, I read a lot of articles about climate change anxiety with younger kids, and how like they're so smart. They absorb things anyway. And, you know, if everyone's talking about climate change, they're going to be thinking about climate change. They're going to be talking about it with their friends and things like that. So, I mean, it is awful that we have to be like, well, you have to be sticking up for your own rights and, you know, protesting this kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like, this is reality, and you know, let's equip you with the tools to like try and talk about these things and think about these things critically and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
It gives them a sense of agency, and that's so important, to not feel powerless and like you can't do anything other than put something in recycling, which even they kind of think, yeah, and you know, what else? Like they actually want more ways to have that ability to aid, because they can't vote yet. And I've got like all different age children, and they're feeling that. My youngest talks about the colours. So she's 7, and the political parties to her are the colours. That's how they recognise them. It's the blue party, the red party, the greens. They get very confused by yellows, but we all do. And so they go through the colours, and they're like, even if someone they don't like or does something, you know, whatever, they'll go, do you think they vote like blue? But they can't do it. They can't go and make those decisions and vote yet. So they want to do something. So
well, it's amazing, like this upswell of support we've seen for even like the Black Lives Matter protests recently. It's been so much of the driving force behind that has been Gen Z, which is just incredible, and like makes me so happy that is a generation that is so politically engaged and so switched on, and you know, can actually has like the critical faculties to you know, think about like fake news and like where their news is coming from, and to like know when they're being lied to online, and which is something like a lot of other generations struggle with, even like millennials and stuff like that, the generation before Gen Z. So yeah, it's amazing that they're so engaged. I love it.
They are, and there was some really good. My husband did research into where kids get news. It's very boring, but it was that they're accessing all this information, and they're actually pretty good at evaluating where it's come from and whether it's accurate on the whole. But some newsletters that were really good, like I think it was called Crinkly News, and it was for proper news outlet for young people, but it got cancelled, like no funding. It was a real shame, because it was like, you know, we've got BTN, which we all grew up with, but there's got to be something in the middle there, you know.
I mean, what did your husband's research say? Like, what is it?
That they found news from loads of sources. I can't quite remember the actual end point of it, but it was that on the whole, they're really quite canny.
Yeah.
And they're probably they're getting a lot more news than we think, because we don't see them sitting and reading a newspaper or necessarily watching it on television, but they get a lot through their own social media and in their own ways. But it's more of a private thing they do without their parents around. But then they're also able to filter more than we'd imagine. They're probably all much better at it than I am. So,
but even like me and things like that, like that explosion of Black Lives Matter protest TikToks, like it's just incredible. Like, and I don't know if you follow the kombucha girl. She was like a TikTok star.
No, I don't really watch TikTok much. It's really loud.
It really is really loud. Also, it is kind of a time suck. Like once you like fall into that hole, it's just like you can't claw yourself back out. Like it's it's like I have a dedicated portion of my time today that's just scrolling through TikTok. It's terrible. But you know, like even the kombucha girl is like talking about like police abolition and things like that on her platform. I mean, it's incredible that they're so switched on. I don't think she got it completely correct, but it's still amazing that she's like talking about that kind of thing and things like that. So
there's a lot more awareness in terms of, no, that's just wrong, because now we've got the trans rights being attacked as well. So now it's like everyone's...
you're going to talk about J.K. Rowling?
Do you know what? I did have a feeling, I have to find my clip. my Vaseline, because this is just going to be, I'm drying out at the thought. And it
whole body
so,
the sultana.
Prepare myself, because I don't tend to get, but look,
yeah.
I was wondering if you needed a vent. Is really where I'm headed.
Can I do a quick vent?
You can do whatever you like.
Did you read that article she posted a few hours ago?
No, I tend to look. I've tried reading little bits of stuff that she's done, but I just get to it makes me want to vomit a bit.
So essentially, like, the whole thing. I don't know if, like, let me know if, like, you need, like, a trigger warning or anything like that, because it's all pretty full on. Like, a trigger warning, abuse, sexual assault, denigration of trans human rights. Essentially, she just went on this spiel about how, like, girls in bathrooms need to be protected, and won't somebody please think of the children, despite that being, like, such a fallacy, such a straw man argument. But there is, like, multiple studies saying that didn't happen and doesn't happen. I mean,
fear-mongering and...
It was all fear-mongering. Just, like, all that, won't somebody please think of the children, despite, 1 in 4 trans children have tried to commit suicide. They have tried to hurt themselves. Like, it's like self-harm and suicide is such a huge issue among trans youth. It's like how someone actually, like, incoherent with rage, how someone can be in the position, like the hallowed position of a children's author, someone who, shapes the mind of young people, and also her books being like a beacon of, like, equality and treating minorities the same as everyone else and lifting people up and things like that. How someone can have those values and then maliciously hurt a younger generation of vulnerable kids.
It seems to have been really hurtful to a lot of people. I was never a Harry Potter fan, so I'm in the position of not feeling the personal loss.
Yeah. You weren't a fan?
No. Oh, God, no.
That cultural phenomenon?
And I have to be really careful because I was doing my PhD alongside in a children's literature department. So I had one of my very best friends who was a massive Harry Potter fan. I don't even know if she watches Auschchat. So I really feel for her right now, because I really feel like she must be feeling very torn, because this was, and it meant so much to her. And I was a big Twilight fan. Now, there are problems with both. I get that there are problems with both, but it was, for one thing, I was studying age-wise. I needed young adult fiction rather than children's. And I only read the first book. I saw it twice at the movies. I was already in my 20s by then. Well, maybe nearly. So I saw the first one come out, and I went and saw it again because I like magic. I like to see magic. But very quickly just didn't want another white boy who went to a private school. Like, I just couldn't see why we needed another one of those stories of what looked like normalizing to me. Now, I know the books progress a lot over 7, and my daughter's a big fan too. So I have to, like, I'm very careful to be respectful of that. But
I think at this point you can just trash it.
I always hated them. I didn't like the stereotypical, everybody who was stereotypical, let alone what they did for redheads. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. I'm glad Ron ended up as a handsome bugger, because, to be honest, it was just a bit, I didn't like what happened in a lot of places in the book and the things it upheld that it didn't question. And yet I've heard, there are characters I never even met when I've only read one book that apparently I would have liked, but I just couldn't. So I'm not feeling the personal loss. I am secretly glad we may actually finally get rid of the series for the children, because a lot of people get really upset if their children don't read Harry Potter and love it.
Really?
A lot. They are pushing and pushing and pushing. And there's someone posted the other day that, finally on the 3rd attempt, I've managed to get them hooked. Now we can read Harry Potter 10 times a week, and these are these little kids. They were like 6. And she's been trying to get them hooked, and they didn't like it, and they didn't like it. And two of my kids can't stand it. But the other one really loved them, which is fine. I never,
Yeah, I mean, I personally, like, my background with Harry Potter is that I was the exact age of Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson. So, like, the age they were when, like, the first movie came out when I was 11, and the second movie came out when I was 12.
So you were the perfect age for every book.
Yeah, essentially. And those books got me through some, like, really hard times in my childhood.
That's it.
Something like that was something I drew from, like, when I wanted to get into children's literature. I was like, well, I want to kind of, make the world a better place like J.K. Rowling did, like, for me. And like, there have been studies that have shown that the influence that J.K. Rowling has had on, like, the millennial generation have instilled these sort of, like, really progressive values in our generation, and we're more empathetic and more compassionate because we've grown up with these characters whose fundamental traits is that they love equality, and they love everyone, and minorities are lifted up, and things like that.
Well, it got people reading. It got kids reading, and it made it acceptable and okay, and it made it exciting to wait for another book. There's so much good came.
Wait, did you talk about Twilight in your PhD? Is that why you were? Oh, what did you say about it? I'm low-key a Twilight fan.
Okay, so in terms of people getting hate for what they like reading, try being a Twilight fan. Okay, and I do. But what always shit me was that people were complaining about the wrong things. They were always complaining about the bruises, and we all have got. Everyone's investigated that and had a good moment with that. But in some ways, I thought it was important that that was shown and explored, and it could have. And everyone got to have an opinion on it, and it brought it up as a topic that people weren't, and it really brought up the idea of, this was not in the PhD, by the way, but the idea of, and for my daughter, who's also a Twilight fan, we talked about, you don't want stalker people, you don't want someone monitoring what you're doing. This is dangerous behavior, that, and that's okay, but this was dodgy, and it brought it up as a conversation. So that's really important. But in the PhD, I was studying life and death, and the space between that. So if you're not alive and you're not dead, or those sorts of characters. And I studied them I think Twilight was the last book after a huge amount of work, obviously. But it was the only one that really upheld the young adult space as valuable. So you don't just become important. You don't have something to offer the community once you become an adult. Everything will happen, and then you grew up. That's like the young adult, often sometimes, what you would read, a Holden Caulfield sort of, then you grow up. Whereas she chooses to remain a young adult. And that's her powerful space. And that was really important in there. But no one talks about the fact that Jacob kissed her without her wanting to be kissed. And then her dad laughed about it, and they all mocked her for being upset about it. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Of all the stuff you're criticising, does no one notice that bit?
I mean, were you obviously Team Edward?
No. I just thought that bit. I just didn't want that bit written that way. Do you know what I mean? Rather than saying Jacob as a person did this thing. But there's a lot of issues with consent in a lot of spaces that people ignored, and the way the dad reacted and things like that.
I think when was the first book written? Like 2005? No, it would be earlier than that. 2003?
2004?
Something like that.
2004? Because I read the first one. I still don't have it. It had a different cover in Australia. It actually had a different cover.
Oh, yeah. It had the creepy goth girl.
The girl, yeah.
Yes.
And I read that one. There were no other books. And I was like, I'll put this in. Oh, let's write about this one. Little did I know what was going to unfold.
That's so funny. So you read it before, like, it blew up.
Yeah. And then I had this whole thing about the fact that they weren't vampires, they were actually archangels, because you can map them onto each of the vampires, you can map onto archangels in their, like, healing powers or their...
Oh, interesting. Right.
And they glitter. They glitter. Oh, and we're not angels.
Not angels at all. I think
So, yeah.
I personally really liked the first Twilight book, and I did read it with that girl cover. Like I just got it out in the library. Yeah, I got it out in the library when it was. I think it was when it was starting to get whispers. Like people were like, "This book's really good," and then I was like in the full craze of it. Like yeah, and then I think when I started like pulling back a bit and being like, I don't know about this, was when like that whole like pregnancy thing and like Jacob imprinting on the baby. I was like,
and the name of the baby.
No,
there's no forgiving that. There is no forgiving that. I can forgive all sorts. Pregnancy's harrowing and horrific, and it was kind of nice to see it be as gross and destructive as it really feels. Yeah. But the name.
I think
don't be naming the baby that.
Yeah, I think I read once that it was like her grandmother's name or something like that, and she wanted
to
like,
put the two together. She put Renee and Esme together and came up with Renesmee.
How many kids are called Renesmee around the world right now?
Hopefully none. I'm really hoping.
but I bet there's one. I bet there's one.
No.
What was the book that you were that you had that like between life and death stage?
Well, like it was between life and death. Well, no, it was all young adult fiction between the years of blah and blah that I can't remember. But so I did Monster Blood Tattoo, and which is an amazing book that not enough people read. Oh, there's a second one. Hang on. They're gorgeous, gorgeous.
Ooh, I haven't read it.
He was an illustrator before he started writing, and they convinced him to write a book to match his like characters and things. But the main character is called Rosamond, which is a girl's name, and he's a foundling. And it starts off with this. He's between everything, life, death, monster, non-monster. They have all these characters that are like, they're fighting the Bogles, the monsters, but then the people who fight them the most get organs from them and have them implanted. So it's a little bit steampunky, and that gives them the ability to fight. But like, it's totally messed up every boundary you can ever imagine, and I just loved it. So I put that in, and I had Clones, and I had Vampire Academy.
Oh, Vampire Academy! Yeah, I haven't read those. But,
that was good in a bit more of a Buffy way.
Yeah. Have you ever read Blood and Chocolate? I can't remember the author's name now.
Like Water for Chocolate?
No, Blood and Chocolate.
No. Yum.
It was. I read it like a few years. It's literally been like 15 years since I've read it, so I'm probably horribly messing up like my view of it in my mind is like it was this great like precursor to Twilight. But if I went back and read it now, I'd be like probably be like it's terrible.
Blood and Chocolate. I'll have to look it up.
When Twilight first became really popular, I was like, why isn't everyone getting into Blood and Chocolate? Because it was this like essentially the plot of Twilight, except it was a girl werewolf instead of like a boy vampire. And like it was like really feminist and really like powerful and
now
it was all about
I want to know.
Yeah, it's really.
I need to read it. It may have fallen out.
But like, if it is terrible, I take that back.
I did put Thirsty in. No, Thirsty.
Sorry.
I used Thirsty by M.T. Anderson, which is a boy vampire turning into a vampire. Oh. It's hilarious. It's the funniest version of vampirism crossed with maturation, like the boy becoming a man. But he's so clever with his words. Like, so putting that in was...
Who was that one by, sorry?
M.T. Anderson.
Yeah.
Who writes some really amazing fiction. So that was in there. But yeah, I had to use them for certain purposes, and I had to have and Tales of the Atari. So I did all of the Leon Hearn's Tales of the Atari. Yeah. I happen to have all these here. There are lots of I've actually got like multiple versions of the series. I don't know how and why, but I really like those.
Someone bought that for me once, and I still haven't gotten around to reading it. It's like it's on my shelf.
It's a bit graphic. Like I remember thinking, "Hey, this is really violent."
No.
But used them all. It all had so a lot of things that just straddled. So one that's The Rat and the Raven, where the character who was Now, how did androgynous described himself? So he had female and male organs, and it was the first time I'd seen, and it was like put on the page. Like he walked down the street with his breasts swelling, and he was naked. I mean, there was no holding back. It was just wow. And it was all like wealth mythology built in, and just some, and all this just boundary crossing, and the idea at the end of it being that the undifferentiated, the ones who don't fit the binary, save the world, and they're the way forward, and they don't need to be normalized. So that's what kind of came out of all that rambling. Sorry. Okay.
Can we make JKR read them? Like that sounds like a good thing for her. Like
I feel sad. I feel sad for people mourning the loss of something, and we get stuck. This is like Michael Jackson music. Like, where do we go now with the fiction that's left behind?
I mean, personally, what's your take on it? Like, do you believe in like the death of the author and ships Texas ships that sail into the night free from the wharf of their author?
I think that everyone has a limit, and whenever they say this is the way it is, you'll find that they have a line. So I may, in terms of like even with theory, we don't use certain theorists when we found out they were Nazis or Nazi sympathizers.
Oh, really?
We've actually, the literary analysis type community have actually started to make sure they stay away from certain theorists who were just downright dodgy in their other lives.
Because there was so much of that.
Jean-Paul Sartre, I believe.
Yeah.
So you still see it quoted, but then if you get into the like more serious theorists, they're a bit like, you know what? We're just not going to use that anymore because it's just
fair enough. I mean, and there's the argument that why promote and love a piece of art by someone who, wouldn't uphold the same values that you do, or not saying the same values, but it doesn't stand for anything good in the world and doesn't import good feelings into the world and things like that. Why give a piece of your heart to a piece of art that is, didn't mean to rhyme there, that is not to use a glib word, but problematic. And there are so many other beautiful pieces of art out there, which like when people say Harry Potter is like this singular thing, I'm like, Joseph Campbell, it was based on like so many heroes that came before him, and that archetype of the hero can be seen in so many books and perpetuated across so many texts throughout history that go watch Star Wars, like it's the same thing.
If you can there are other series to love out there. I don't know where the line is though. So what if you find out your favorite author had a drink driving charge against them? Like, do you then stop reading theirs? Is that bad enough? How bad does it have to be? So where's that line? And I don't really know where.
That's something you really have to negotiate with yourself and see what you're comfortable with.
Like, what's his name? And he wrote like everything. Tomorrow When the War Began. And,
John Marston. Yeah.
Like, what do we do there? I know people who are good friends with him who are a bit like, but he's a good man. He just did a really silly thing. And I'm like, he actively did a silly thing that was really hurtful. Now I don't know what to do with all of his books, and I still don't know.
A lot of people are also saying that about J.K. Rowling, is that she's, she comes from a different generation who doesn't particularly understand and isn't really on top of like the acceptance and progressive values that society has been trying to come to terms with. And she's part of that generation that's like the holdout, and they're saying like, no, it's our values, it's our that's the way in traditional times it was, so that's the only way it can be, which is silly because society completely always marches forward. Like the march of time. That's
it. Yeah. And what about all the trans people who are her age and older? I'm sure they're not going, well, it's just my age.
I know. Like, I want to transition, but it's my age. I'm 55. I'm 60. I can't transition.
That's ridiculous. I know people who have at that age, and it's like they're not stuck because of how I grew up in the most racist and homophobic household. Not my mum ever. Sorry, just if anyone goes and makes assumptions. My dad, vile, absolutely horrible. And we were told all sorts of horrible things. And but you learn better. You change, and I even as a kid, I knew that was wrong, the stuff he said. So even back, and I'm 42, so even back then I knew the stuff that he sprouted was just wrong.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting when you like, because my family was lower socioeconomic but really conservative, which is strange. It's really funny, like when you take a step back when you're growing up and you're like, oh no, wait, the things that like I grew up with and like going to church and like being told a certain thing and like having certain rhetoric and dogma like shoved down your throat, that you're actually having like getting to step back from that and having the critical faculty to be like, no, actually I'm gonna form my own opinion. And yeah,
and there's a sense of agency that we've come full circle, because we need that. And when you can but you need sometimes support to understand how to think the way that you want to. So if you want to think in a revolutionary way but you're not quite sure how to do it, that's where books and social media and things can answer those questions and help you know how to do it.
Definitely. Like, the awful thing was that like one of those texts that helped me actually like have some sort of foundation of my values nowadays is Harry Potter.
I'm very sad for you now. So sad.
I mean, you could see my terrible Harry Potter tattoo as well.
I saw it on Twitter.
Not good. It's not good.
It's not terrible. Like you say, it could look like you've got mail.
Yeah.
My daughter has a purse. She has that as a purse, an envelope. Sorry? My daughter's purse is an envelope, like Harry Potter envelope.
Oh, that is
and she
so
just
cool.
came up to me and she goes, oh, it's kind of falling apart. And I'm like, yeah, no, you need a new purse. Like, but it's a bit sad. How will I know what to buy her all the time if I can't just buy her Harry Potter stuff?
Oh my gosh, I think my mum's going through the same thing. Like every single birthday and Christmas for me, it's just like a Harry Potter jersey, a Hogwarts scarf. Like now she's going to be like, oh God, what else is Sophie into?
Oh no. But you all need what can we replace it with? What book? Because I like the Monster Blood tattoo books, highly recommended, because they question, like it's a little bit like reading I used to say it was a cross between Harry Potter and Tolkien.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like wordy in that way, but he creates a world that's completely full. There are maps. Everything has its own names. It has its own social structure. It has its own everything. But it goes places you just wouldn't even believe. Starts with a normal bullying in an orphanary sort of thing, and ends up taking you just, oh my goodness, the world just twists your brain around. I have such a hero in there. The woman in there's just like stolen my heart, and I love her. Her name's Europe, and she's just stunning and hard, and she fights, but she's got some heart. Just so everyone could fall in love with that series. What else have we got?
I mean, also,
dragons.
Rick Riordan, the author of Percy Jackson novels and the Heroes of Olympus. And oh God, he's amazing. Like,
good.
I appreciate so much that he is actually using his voice to lift up other like minority authors. I mean, there's nothing more...
ADHD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so good. Like that's like the top of allyship is to be like, I have a platform. I'm using my platform for good, but beyond that, I'm going to actually lift people up. Like people who might not have gotten this chance otherwise and might be overlooked in the publishing sphere or something like that. I'm actually going to use my privilege for good, which is just, I have so much respect for him.
Which is what you're doing. They are really good too. I read all of those.
Did you read the Heroes of Olympus? The one?
Yes.
They're my favorite.
It was a few years ago now.
Yeah.
But I read
a few heroes. Yeah.
Read everything. The kids love them, and they like Emily Rodder's all of her books.
Oh my God, Emily Rodder! Oh, the queen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't that be like poetic justice if The next like huge cultural phenomenon is by someone who doesn't identify in the strict way that J.K. Rowling says that you should.
Exactly. And so what's next for you as an author, and now that you have 50 million books out, where do you head next?
I have a book coming out in November, which I'm very excited about. It's called There Is No Magic in This Book. And it's by this magical, beautiful lady called Michelle McWhirter. And it's published by Walker Books Australia. And it's sort of just like a meta, like, journey through a castle. And the main character is saying, you can't see any magic, there's no magic happening here, but there's magic happening everywhere. And it's it's very fun. And I hate to say it, I did listen to the Harry Potter books while I was illustrating it. So, but I kind of want to turn this like, I want to try and separate that from this, because, you know, like there are so many like Harry Potter jokes in there, and now I'm just looking back at it, I'm like, oh God, why? So let's try and like separate it from that now.
No.
And be like, well, maybe it's its own thing. Despite all of the like the foundation of magic that I grew up with informing how I perceive magic and fantasy, I'm going to try and step beyond that and find new ways of like expressing that. And I think this book, maybe like I'm going to try and think about it a different way now. But it is really beautiful, and Michelle is just the loveliest person. And it's such a clever book, and I like it. Is the kind of book that I hope your kid will be able to spend like just like so much time and hours just poring over and finding all the little jokes I hid in there, and like all the continuous jokes I hid throughout it. And yeah.
That's fascinating. It's fascinating to think how much goes into them, and I love it. My kids love their even though they're older, they still have all the picture books and love reading them to that. And they go back as they get older too, and then they see more and more and more, and they just completely live on in that way. I love that.
Oh, definitely. Like there have been like so many books that like I still think about them as like an adult, and like particularly that I work in kids publishing now. It's like, well, like for example, the first book I ever published was Ren, written by Katrina Lehman, published by Scribble, and I had finished completely finished that book and sent it off to print and everything. And I was going back to some of my favorite books as a kid, because I picked them up from my mum's house and took them over to my own house. And I'd realized that I'd actually made the mum in Ren look really similar to the mum from Bob Graham's Rosie and Mr. Wintergarden.
Oh. Is that the one with the cat?
No, it's the little girl who lives next door to the grumpy man in the mansion, and then she kicks her football. And then,
because I recognize that though, but that's. Oh.
So I'm sorry, Bob Graham, that I drew from your character design for that book.
Don't be sorry. That's how it works. Yeah,
so
building on
in like how I saw mothers, and how I saw families, and how I saw neighbours, and everything that kind of just seeped into my subconscious.
Oh, that's so lovely. Oh, I liked In the Night Kitchen. Do you mean it's the unspoken about? Yeah,
I think I have a copy of that
because it's got the Willy. And it makes no sense. The whole of it makes zero sense.
I think I read once that he did Wild Things and In the Night Kitchen, or maybe it was the one before that, whose name I'm blanking on right now, as a kind of like a duo or a trilogy about like nightscape and like the dream state and things like that, like the subconscious. I could be completely making that up, but I think I remember.
No, but that would make sense to me. I mean, it really is like the weirdest book. And I should say, do you know what? I do understand. Sorry, this is totally, we should go. And I'm so sorry I've kept you so long.
No, not at all.
But talk about tattoos of things that you then think, oh, because I have a tattoo. It's a record of our history.
Well, I think that's personally what I see tattoos as. Like, I'm not going to cover up my Harry Potter tattoo because, I mean, those books still meant a lot to me. And it's and it's something that got me through a really hard time in my life, and it's something that informed my values and my career choice, and is like a fundamental building block to who I am. And I'm not going to give her my money anymore, and I'm vocally going to speak out against it when she says things like that. But tattoos are sort of like a I see them as sort of like a roadmap to your life. Like it's like recording your life experiences on your body, and I think that's really beautiful. Like I don't want to die and be like, oh well, I guess I should have gotten that tattoo, that I'm gonna regret it now. Like it's just make your body a work of art and don't regret it. And
absolutely I agree. My whole back's tattooed because I felt like it.
Like
and I had spare money at the time. People don't often think about how much it can cost.
A lot, yeah. It's expensive. Oh, you have to show me your back tattoo one day. I need to see this.
We should still stop recording, and then I can show you.
I have an L.M. Montgomery tattoo. That's Anne of Green Gables. Like so if anything ever comes out problematic about her,
No, she's like one of my favorite ADHD heroes.
Was she ADHD?
Well, no, couch diagnosed, as in real. Hey, look at all of her behaviour and everything that happens. Oh, gee, she is probably neurodivergent, but that's just my opinion.
Oh no, I completely buy into that. That is my new headcanon about Anne. That completely makes sense.
I like it. Beautiful.
Yeah, like do like a flip through really quickly.
Yeah,
because I feel like I just talked about J.K. Rowling for the
No. It's really great.
I mean, this is probably my favorite page, which I wish I could show J.K. Rowling. Very, very pertinent. Change starts with learning about the world. Learn about the world. Don't just, buy into your old prejudices and silly things. Learn about it. Be in a state of flux and a dynamic learning state all the time. Don't just be static and boring.
Perfectly said. There's my soundbite that I needed too. There you go. Thank you for coming on. Bye. Bye.